The marble floors of the Palladium Maximus had never gleamed so brightly. Celine's knees ached from hours of scrubbing, her rough linen dress soaked through with water and sweat. She'd been working since before dawn, when the first light touched the 7 hills of Rome, and the sun now hung high overhead, merciless and unforgiving. Around her, the palace hummed with frantic preparation, servants rushing past with armloads of silk, guards taking positions along every corridor, and the ever-present shouts of the steward demanding perfection. "Girl, that corner still has dust!" The steward's voice cracked like a whip across the hall. "The emperor will walk these floors tonight. Do you want him to see filth?" Celine didn't bother responding. She simply dragged her bucket to the offending corner and began scrubbing again, her hands raw and bleeding from the harsh soap. She was invisible here, had always been invisible, just another faceless servant among hundreds who kept the palace functioning while nobles lived in luxury above. She'd been born in the slums beyond the Tiber, daughter of a woman who died bringing her into the world, and a father who disappeared before she could walk. The temple priests had taken her in, more out of obligation than charity, and when she turned 12, they'd sold her contract to the imperial household. 6 years had passed since then. 6 years of scrubbing, polishing, lighting torches, and staying out of sight. The other servants whispered that tonight would change everything. Emperor Lucius Aurelius, ruler of the known world, had summoned every royal daughter from Rome's vast provinces. 100 princesses, they said, each more beautiful and accomplished than the last. They would arrive in golden litters, draped in silks from the east, jewels worth more than Celine would earn in 10 lifetimes glittering at their throats. The emperor had been unmarried for 10 years, ever since ascending to the throne at age 20. Rome needed an empress, the Senate demanded an heir, and Lucius had finally agreed to choose a bride. The ball would last 3 nights, 3 opportunities for these princesses to display their beauty, wit, and political value. Celine wondered what it felt like to be wanted like that, to have your presence anticipated rather than ignored, to wear silk instead of rough linen, to have soft hands instead of calloused ones, to matter. Celine, another servant, a girl named Cassia, grabbed her arm. "Have you seen them arriving? Come look." "I can't. The steward is busy yelling at the cooks. Come on, just for a moment." Cassia pulled her toward one of the high windows overlooking the palace courtyard. Below, a spectacle unfolded that belonged in legends rather than reality. Golden litters borne by matched slaves in pristine white tunics processed through the gates in an endless stream. Each princess emerged like a goddess descending to earth, one in flowing blue silk that matched her eyes, another in crimson with a crown of rubies, a third in cloth of gold that made her shine like captured sunlight. "That one's Princess Drusilla of Gaul," Cassia whispered, pointing to a striking woman with hair like spun copper and a smile that didn't reach her cold green eyes. "They say she's poisoned 3 rivals already. And that one, the dark-haired beauty in purple, she's Princess Livia from Hispania. Her dowry could fund the army for a year." Celine watched them glide through the courtyard like exotic birds, their laughter carrying up to the window. Each had been groomed since birth for this moment, trained in music and poetry, schooled in the arts of seduction and political maneuvering. Each believed herself destined for the imperial crown. "What do you think the emperor looks like?" Cassia asked dreamily. "They say he's handsome as Apollo himself. I wouldn't know. Servants don't look at emperors." "Oh, don't be so serious. Haven't you even seen him from a distance?" Celine shrugged. She'd caught glimpses occasionally. A figure in purple moving through corridors surrounded by guards, a silhouette on a balcony addressing crowds in the forum. But she'd never looked closely, never dared. There was an invisible wall between people like her and people like him, a wall built from birth and station and destiny. Princesses could cross it, servants could not. "Back to work," she said, turning from the window. "We'll both be whipped if we're caught shirking." The afternoon dissolved into chaos as the palace transformed. Servants hung garlands of roses and myrtle from every column. Musicians took their positions in the great hall, tuning lyres and testing flutes. Tables groaned under the weight of imported delicacies, dates from Egypt, oysters from Britannia, wines aged in cellars older than memory. The air itself seemed to shimmer with anticipation and expense. Celine's task for the evening was simple: light the torches throughout the palace as twilight fell, then disappear. The ball would begin at sunset, and by then, all servants were expected to be invisible, present enough to refill wine cups and remove dishes, but essentially unseen by the glittering crowd. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Celine made her rounds with a lit taper. She moved through corridors and chambers, reaching up to ignite oil-soaked torches that would illuminate the night's festivities. The work was mindless, meditative, and she found herself humming softly, a melody her mother had supposedly sung, one the temple priests had taught her. The song was ancient, older than Rome itself. It spoke of longing and loss, of loves divided by fate and station. Celine didn't know why she loved it so much, only that singing it made her feel less alone in a palace full of people who would never see her. She was lighting the last torch in the grand hall when she heard the first strains of music beginning. The ball had started. Through the marble archway she could see the princesses assembling, a rainbow of silks and jewels, each vying for position closest to the empty throne at the hall's far end. Celine retreated quickly to the shadows behind a massive pillar, content to watch for just a moment before returning to the servants' quarters. She'd never seen anything so beautiful. The way candlelight caught on golden thread, the graceful movements of women who'd been taught to dance before they could walk, the calculated smiles and strategic positioning as each princess prepared to make her impression. Trumpets sounded clear and bright. A herald's voice rang out. His Imperial Majesty, Lucius Aurelius, Divine Emperor of Rome, Protector of the Provinces, First Citizen and Father of the Nation. The princesses sank into deep curtsies as Emperor Lucius entered the hall. From her hiding place behind the pillar, Celine could only see him in profile, but what she saw made her breath catch. He was younger than she'd imagined, perhaps 30 years old, with the bearing of a warrior and the face of a poet. Dark hair cut in the military style, strong features that spoke of his patrician bloodline, and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the entire empire. He wore a purple toga with minimal adornment, secure enough in his power that he needed no excessive display. But there was something in his expression that surprised Celine. Sadness, perhaps, or weariness. He looked at the assembled princesses not with desire or anticipation, but with the resignation of a man fulfilling an obligation. The music swelled. Lucius descended the steps from his throne and offered his hand to Princess Drusilla, who accepted with a triumphant smile. They began the first dance, a complex pattern that the other princesses would join as the evening progressed. Celine watched for another moment, then turned to leave. This was no place for her. These were not her people, not her world. She belonged in the shadows, with the other invisible hands that kept Rome functioning. But as she moved quietly along the pillar, her foot caught on an uneven stone. She stumbled, catching herself against the marble, but not before her bucket clattered loudly across the floor. The music didn't stop, but several heads turned toward the sound. Celine froze, mortified, pressing herself against the pillar and praying she'd disappear into the stone itself. "Clumsy servant," she heard Princess Drusilla's voice carry across the hall. "Can't the steward control his slaves?" Laughter rippled through the crowd, polite, dismissive, already forgetting the interruption. But as Celine risked a glance toward the dancers, she found herself locked in the emperor's gaze. Lucius had turned mid-step, looking directly at her hiding place with an expression of surprise and something else she couldn't identify. For one impossible moment, the ruler of Rome and a nameless servant girl stared at each other across a crowded hall. Then the moment passed. The emperor returned to his dance, and Celine fled through the servants' entrance, heart hammering against her ribs for reasons she couldn't explain. Behind her, the ball continued. 100 princesses competed for imperial favor, displaying their beauty and wit and political connections. But none of them had seen what Celine had seen in that brief moment, a flicker of recognition in the emperor's eyes, as if he'd been searching for something and unexpectedly found it in the last place he'd thought to look. In the shadows, forgotten and invisible, a servant girl touched her chest where her heart still raced, and wondered why the emperor's gaze had felt like sunlight after years of darkness. The night was young, and fate had only begun to weave its unexpected pattern. Celine's hands trembled as she filled the oil lamps in the eastern corridor, far from the grand hall where music and laughter still echoed. Hours had passed since her clumsy stumble, since that impossible moment when the emperor's eyes had found hers, but her heart refused to calm. She told herself it meant nothing, a glance, nothing more. Emperors didn't truly see servants. The corridor was empty, save for marble busts of past emperors lining the walls, their stone eyes judging her with eternal disapproval. Celine moved from lamp to lamp, her movements automatic after years of repetition. The palace had grown quieter as midnight approached, though the ball would continue until dawn. Most servants had been dismissed to their quarters, their evening tasks complete. Celine should have been dismissed too, but she'd volunteered to light the torches in the palace's upper levels, work no one else wanted because it required climbing narrow staircases and navigating dark passages. She preferred it to returning to the cramped servants' dormitory, where Cassia and the others would pepper her with questions about the princesses, the emperor, the splendor she'd witnessed. As she worked, she hummed again, that same ancient melody that rose unbidden from her throat whenever her mind wandered. The song felt like home, like the only inheritance her unknown mother had left her. The temple priest had said it was very old, a hymn sung by the Vestal Virgins in Rome's earliest days, though how her mother had known it, they couldn't say. The melody floated through the empty corridor, soft and melancholy. Speaking of longing and impossible dreams, Celine let her voice grow slightly louder, emboldened by solitude. That song. Celine spun around, the oil lamp nearly slipping from her hands. Her heart stopped. Emperor Lucius Aurelius stood 20 paces away, half hidden in shadow, still wearing his purple toga, though it was now slightly disheveled. No guards accompanied him. He was completely, impossibly alone. Celine dropped immediately to her knees, pressing her forehead to the cold marble, terror flooding her veins. She'd been caught singing while the emperor walked nearby, a presumption that could mean whipping or worse. "Forgive me, divine Caesar," she whispered. I didn't mean, rise." The command was soft but absolute. Celine obeyed on trembling legs, though she kept her eyes fixed firmly on the floor. "That song," Lucius repeated, moving closer. "Where did you learn it?" "The temple priests taught me, divine Caesar. They said my mother used to sing it before she died. I meant no offense. My mother sang that song." The emperor's voice carried a weight of memory and grief. "Every night before I slept, she would sit at my bedside and sing those exact words. I haven't heard it in 15 years, not since fever took her." Celine risked a glance upward. Lucius stood close enough now that she could see his face clearly in the lamplight. The sadness she'd glimpsed during the ball had deepened into something rawer, more vulnerable. He didn't look like the ruler of the known world. He looked like a man haunted by loss. "I'm sorry, divine Caesar, if the song causes you pain." "No." Lucius shook his head slowly. "Not pain. Memory. There's a difference." He studied her with intensity. "What's your name?" "Celine, divine Caesar." "Celine, like the moon." A faint smile touched his lips, then vanished. "How long have you worked in the palace?" 6 years, divine Caesar." 6 years, and I've never seen you before tonight. Because emperors don't see servants, Celine thought, but remained silent. Lucius seemed to read her thoughts. "You think I don't notice the people who keep this palace functioning? You're wrong. I notice everything. The efficiency of the kitchens, the cleanliness of the halls, the way torches are always lit before darkness falls. I simply cannot acknowledge everyone personally." He paused. "But tonight, I noticed you specifically, when you stumbled during the ball. When you looked at me with those eyes full of, what was it?" "Terror, divine Caesar," Celine said honestly. "Pure terror that I'd ruined your celebration." To her shock, Lucius laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. "At least you're honest. The princesses downstairs would claim they felt only admiration and love, though most barely know my name beyond my title." The laughter faded. "Do you know why I left my own ball?" She shook her head. "Because I couldn't bear another moment of calculated smiles and rehearsed compliments. Princess Drusilla compared my eyes to Jupiter's lightning in a poem she'd clearly memorized. Princess Livia recited her province's entire economic output as if I would choose a wife based on grain statistics. Every single one of them looks at me and sees a crown, not a man." He moved to the window overlooking the city. "I walked these corridors hoping for silence. Instead, I heard my mother's song. Do you believe in signs from the gods, Celine?" "I don't know, divine Caesar. The gods have never shown much interest in people like me." Another smile tinged with bitterness. Honest again. "My mother believed the gods spoke through small moments. A bird's flight, a sudden breeze, a stranger's song in an empty corridor. She would have said this meeting was fated. Your mother sounds wise, divine Caesar." She was. Too wise for this world. Lucius's expression grew distant. "She used to tell me that an emperor's greatest loneliness isn't lack of company, but lack of truth." Everyone wants something from you, so no one tells you what you need to hear. Celine didn't know how to respond. This conversation was so far beyond her understanding that she felt adrift in unfamiliar waters. "May I ask you something?" Lucius said suddenly. "Of course, Divine Caesar. When you looked at me tonight during the ball, what did you see?" The question was so unexpected that Celine answered before thinking. "I saw sadness, like someone attending their own funeral instead of their own celebration." Silence stretched between them. Celine immediately regretted her words, certain she'd overstepped. But when Lucius spoke, his voice held wonder rather than anger. 6 years in this palace, and you're the first person to see that. To say it aloud, he moved closer. Everyone else sees what they want to see. Power, authority, opportunity. You saw truth. I shouldn't have spoken so freely, Divine Caesar. No, that's exactly what I needed. Truth from someone who wants nothing from me because she expects I have nothing to give her. He laughed softly. Do you know what power an emperor actually possesses? I can give you gold, land, freedom, but I cannot buy honesty or sincerity. Those things exist outside imperial power. They exist in everyone, Divine Caesar. Even princesses. Perhaps they're just frightened. Of what? Of disappointing you. Of saying the wrong thing and losing their chance at the crown. Celine surprised herself with her boldness. It's easy to be honest when you have nothing to lose. Harder when everything depends on pleasing the person in front of you. Lucius stared at her, then nodded slowly. Wise words from someone so young. How old are you? 18, Divine Caesar. 18. A child when you came here. And now you stand before me offering wisdom my advisors have never provided. He moved back toward the window. I have to return to the ball soon. But first I want to ask you something. Do you think I should marry one of them? Those 100 princesses, each perfect in their own way, each offering political advantage. Should I choose duty over whatever else might exist? Celine's breath caught. I think emperors don't have the luxury of choosing anything except duty. That's what makes you emperor instead of simply a man. And if I'm tired of being emperor, then the empire suffers, Divine Caesar. And thousands of people like me, people who depend on Rome's strength, pay the price for that moment of selfishness. The words hung between them, brutal in their honesty. You would lecture me about duty? No, Divine Caesar. I would simply remind you that you asked for truth. Lucius laughed again. My mother would have liked you. She had the same iron core beneath soft words. He moved toward the corridor's far end, then paused. Sing for me, Celine. One more time, the way my mother used to sing it. So Celine sang, her voice small but pure in the empty corridor, the ancient melody rising toward the vaulted ceiling. She sang of longing and loss, of loves divided by fate, of dreams that died before dawn. When she finished, Lucius stood motionless, eyes closed, tears on his cheeks. Thank you, he whispered, for the song, for the truth, for seeing sadness instead of divinity. He opened his eyes, meeting hers one final time. Return to your duties, Celine, and forget this conversation happened. It's safer for both of us that way. Then he was gone, disappearing into the palace's passages, returning to his throne and his 100 waiting princesses. Celine stood alone in the corridor, lamp trembling in her hands, and knew with absolute certainty that forgetting was impossible. The Emperor of Rome had heard her sing, and nothing would ever be the same. The second night of the ball arrived with even greater spectacle than the first. Word had spread through Rome that Emperor Lucius was actively evaluating potential brides, and the city buzzed with speculation. Merchants did brisk business selling viewing positions along the routes where princesses traveled to the palace. Betting houses established odds on which royal daughter would capture the imperial heart. Inside the palace, the atmosphere crackled with intensified competition. The princesses had spent the day analyzing the emperor's reactions, consulting with advisors, adjusting strategies. Alliances formed and dissolved. Sabotage was whispered about in darkened corridors. Every smile concealed calculation. Celine tried to lose herself in work, scrubbing marble floors she'd cleaned the day before. But her hands moved mechanically while her mind remained trapped in that midnight corridor, replaying every word, every impossible moment when an emperor had spoken to her as if she were human. You look like you've seen a ghost, Cassia said, appearing with fresh water. Are you ill? Just tired, Celine lied. How could she explain? That the emperor had sought her out, listened to her song, asked her advice? No one would believe it. Well, wake up. The steward wants all hands ready. Princess Drusilla complained that her wine wasn't refilled quickly enough last night, and he's threatening to whip whoever serves her section. Celine's stomach twisted. Princess Drusilla had already made an impression. Calculating green eyes, a smile like a blade, and a voice that could freeze blood when displeased. As twilight approached, Selene took her position in the grand hall alongside other serving staff. They lined the walls like living statuary, each holding a wine amphora or tray of delicacies, trained to be invisible until needed. The steward made final inspections, adjusting postures, ensuring perfect uniformity. "Remember," he hissed, "you are shadows. You anticipate needs before they're spoken, and if any of you embarrass this household—" He didn't finish the threat. The trumpets sounded. The princesses entered in carefully choreographed procession. Each had drawn lots that morning to determine entrance order. They glittered like a jewelry merchant's fever dream. Sapphires from the east, emeralds from Egypt, rubies from distant provinces. Their gowns represented months of master craftsman's work. Princess Drusilla entered near the end, timing calculated to be memorable. She wore cloth of gold that caught every lamplight flicker, her copper hair arranged with actual golden leaves. When she smiled, it was like watching a predator bare its teeth. Finally, Emperor Lucius entered. Unlike the previous night, he wore full imperial regalia, purple and gold, the laurel crown, rings of office. He looked every inch the divine ruler, remote and magnificent. His expression revealed nothing. Celine's heart sank. This wasn't the man who'd cried at her song. This was the Emperor of Rome, and the distance between them had never felt more absolute. The dancing began. Lucius moved through prescribed rituals with mechanical precision. A dance with Princess Livia, then Princess Claudia, then Princess Marcella. Each princess deployed carefully rehearsed charm. Some attempted wit, others played to feminine grace, a few tried intellectual conversation. From her position against the wall, Selene watched. Princess Livia talked too much about her dowry. Princess Claudia giggled at everything. Princess Marcella tried quoting philosophy but confused Plato with Aristotle, earning a polite correction. Then it was Princess Drusilla's turn. She approached with perfect grace, curtsying with just the right depth. When Lucius offered his hand, she took it as if receiving a sacred gift. "Your Imperial Majesty honors me beyond measure," she said, her voice pitched perfectly. "The honor is mine, Princess. Your beauty is spoken of throughout the empire. Beauty fades, divine Caesar. I prefer to offer something more lasting: loyalty, political acumen, and alliances that would strengthen Rome's position in Gaul for generations." Selene felt grudging respect despite instinctive dislike. At least Drusilla was honest about the transaction, a crown in exchange for strategic advantage. They danced, and Selene noticed how Drusilla positioned herself perfectly, laughed at precisely the right moments, maintained eye contact without seeming forward. Every movement was calculated, every word deployed like a chess piece. "She's good," Cassia whispered. "If I were the emperor, I'd choose her. Beautiful, smart, politically useful. What more could he want? Truth," Selene thought. Someone who sees him as a man instead of a crown. The dance ended. Princess Drusilla curtsied again, deeper this time, then withdrew with a final smile that promised everything and revealed nothing. The evening progressed. Wine flowed freely. Princesses laughed like wind chimes. Musicians played increasingly complex pieces, and through it all, servants moved like ghosts. Selene was carrying a fresh amphora of wine when it happened. She approached a cluster of princesses near a marble pillar, Princess Drusilla and 3 allies, whispering among themselves. Selene knew protocol: approach silently, refill cups without interrupting, withdraw without acknowledgement. But as she poured wine into Princess Drusilla's golden cup, she overheard the conversation. "Saw him walking the eastern corridors alone last night, after midnight, without guards." "Foolish," Drusilla replied. "An emperor should never be unguarded. It shows weakness." Selene's hands trembled. Wine sloshed dangerously close to the rim. "Careful, girl," Princess Drusilla snapped, turning to face her directly. "That wine costs more than you'll earn in a lifetime." "Forgive me, Your Highness," Selene murmured. Drusilla studied her with predatory interest. "You're the clumsy one from last night, the servant who stumbled during the Emperor's entrance." "Yes, Your Highness. Look at me when I address you." Selene raised her eyes reluctantly. Drusilla's gaze was sharp, calculating. Such rough hands, Drusilla said suddenly, grabbing Celine's wrist and displaying it to her companions. Look at this, calloused, scarred, like a field slave's. This is what serves us in the imperial palace? She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. No wonder Rome needs a proper empress. The household has clearly fallen into disrepair. The other princesses tittered obediently. Celine felt heat rising in her cheeks. Shame mixed with anger she had no right to express. Those hands have built more of Rome than your perfume ever could. The voice cut through the laughter like a blade. Emperor Lucius stood behind them, having approached unnoticed. His expression was thunderous. The laughter died instantly. Princess Drusilla released Celine's wrist as if burned. Divine Caesar, I meant no. You meant exactly what you said. Lucius's voice was cold, carrying full imperial authority. You sought to elevate yourself by diminishing someone who works harder in a single day than you've worked in your entire life. Your Majesty, I was merely commenting. My mother used to say you could measure a person's character by how they treated those who could do nothing for them. By that measure, Princess, you have revealed yourself completely. The silence spread like ripples. Nearby conversation stopped. Dancers paused. Every eye turned toward the confrontation. I apologize, Divine Caesar. No, you spoke truthfully, revealing the contempt you hold for those beneath your station. Lucius turned to Celine, who stood frozen. This servant's hands, rough as they may be, keep the palace functioning. They light the torches that illuminate our celebrations. They polish the floors we dance upon. He faced the assembled court. Let it be known, those who serve faithfully are to be honored, not mocked. Any who abuse servants in my household answer to me personally. Then he did something that made the entire court gasp. He took Celine's rough, calloused hand in his own and kissed it, as he might kiss the hand of a princess. Thank you, he said quietly, meant only for her ears, for your service. Then he released her hand and turned back to Princess Drusilla. You may withdraw from the ball, Princess. I suggest you spend the remainder of the evening reflecting on the difference between nobility of birth and nobility of character. Drusilla's face flushed red, then white. She curtsied stiffly, then fled the hall, her golden gown trailing like a banner of defeat. The music resumed hesitantly. Conversations restarted, now buzzing with this new scandal. Lucius returned to his throne without another word, leaving Celine standing near the pillar, her hand still tingling where his lips had touched it. Sweet Venus, Cassia breathed beside her. Did that just happen? Celine couldn't answer. Her entire world had shifted. The emperor had defended her publicly, had humiliated a princess on her behalf, had kissed her hand before the entire court, and as whispers spread through the grand hall like wildfire, one truth became inescapably clear. The game had changed, and Celine, a servant girl who wanted nothing more than to remain invisible, had somehow become its central piece. The palace woke to scandal. By dawn, every servant, guard, and noble within the Palatium Maximus had heard about the previous night's confrontation. The story spread like plague through Rome's streets, embellished, distorted, transformed with each retelling. Some said the emperor had declared his love for a slave. Others claimed Princess Drusilla had been permanently banished. A few whispered that the servant girl was actually a goddess in disguise. Celine knew none of these things were true, but truth mattered less than perception. She'd spent a sleepless night in the servants' dormitory, enduring Cassia's relentless questions and hostile stares from other servants who resented the attention she'd drawn. When morning came, she rose with aching muscles and dark circles under her eyes, dreading whatever this day would bring. The steward summoned her immediately after dawn prayers. You, he said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury, have become a problem. Celine stood before him, hands clasped to stop their trembling. I didn't ask for any of this, Master Steward. I was simply doing my duty. Your duty is to be invisible. He slammed his palm on the desk. Your duty is to serve without being noticed, without causing disruption, without becoming the subject of palace gossip. Do you understand what you've done? No, Master Steward. You've made yourself a target. He leaned forward, his expression somewhere between anger and concern. Princess Drusilla is not a woman who forgives insults. She has powerful allies, significant resources, and no moral constraints. Last night, you became her enemy, and enemies of Princess Drusilla have a disturbing tendency to suffer accidents. The words sent ice through Celine's veins. What should I do? Stay invisible. Keep your head down. Avoid the princesses entirely. He paused. And for the love of all the gods, stay away from the emperor. Whatever strange fascination he's developed can only end badly. Celine nodded mutely and was dismissed. She spent the morning in the palace's deepest storage rooms, organizing supplies that hadn't been touched in years, work deliberately chosen to keep her far from the grand hall. She scrubbed amphoras, counted linens, and tried desperately not to think about the emperor's lips on her hand. But solitude, she discovered, was no protection. She was cataloging olive oil jars when footsteps echoed in the entrance. Celine turned, expecting another servant, and instead found herself facing three figures in expensive robes, women whose faces she recognized from the ball, allies of Princess Drusilla. "So this is where the little mouse is hiding," one of them said, a thin woman with cold eyes. How appropriate, scurrying in the dark with the other vermin. Celine's heart hammered. "Can I help you, my ladies?" "Actually, you can." The woman stepped closer. "You can explain what magic you used to bewitch the emperor. What spell did you cast?" "I used no magic, my lady. I simply—" "Liar." The slap came without warning, snapping Celine's head to the side. She tasted blood. "Servants don't simply attract imperial attention. You must have done something. Slipped him a potion or used some common whore's trick." Celine backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The storage room was a dead end. "Princess Drusilla sends a message," the thin woman continued. "She wants you to understand your place. She wants you to remember that servants are property, easily disposed of when they become inconvenient. She wants to frighten a girl who's done nothing wrong except exist in the emperor's sight." The new voice came from the doorway. Emperor Lucius stood there, dressed in a simple white tunic, but his authority was unmistakable. Behind him stood two Praetorian guards. The three noble women went pale. The thin one dropped to her knees. "Divine Caesar, we meant no harm. Simply assaulting one of my household servants on behalf of a princess I publicly humiliated last night." Lucius's quiet voice was somehow more terrifying. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" "Your Majesty, we were only—" Silence. He stepped into the storage room. "You will return to your quarters immediately. Pack your belongings. By sunset you will be on ships returning to your provinces. If you are found within Rome's walls after tomorrow's dawn, you will be arrested for assault. But the ball— Go, before I decide exile is too merciful." The three women fled. The guards followed, leaving Celine alone with the emperor. "Are you hurt?" Lucius asked, his voice transforming to genuine concern. Celine touched her split lip. "It's nothing, Divine Caesar. It's not nothing." He approached, reaching toward her face, then stopped. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have defended you so publicly last night. I knew it would make you a target, but I couldn't bear hearing her mock you. You shouldn't apologize for doing what was right. Right for you, perhaps. Wrong for your safety." He looked around the storage room with disgust. "Is this where they've hidden you? In the darkest corner of the palace? The steward thought it best I stay out of sight." "The steward is a coward." Lucius ran a hand through his hair. "Everything about this is wrong. I'm the emperor of Rome. I command legions, control the fate of millions. But I cannot protect one girl from jealous nobles without creating a scandal that threatens to destabilize the entire palace. Then don't protect me, Divine Caesar." The words escaped before she could stop them. "Let me return to invisibility. Let the scandal fade. Choose one of your princesses, marry, produce heirs, secure Rome's future. That's what matters, not whatever this is." Lucius stared at her. "And if I don't want to choose any of them? If the only honest words I've heard in this entire cursed ball came from a servant girl in a darkened corridor? Then you're being selfish," Celine said, her voice breaking. "Because I'm not an option. I can never be an option. The Senate would revolt. Rome would tear itself apart before accepting a servant as empress." "Who says you have to be empress? What if I simply want to know you, to hear you sing again, to have someone in this palace who speaks truth? That's not how this works, and you know it." Tears burned behind her eyes. "Every moment you spend with me builds a story that ends in disaster. For you, political complications. For me, death. Princess Drusilla has already sent assassins disguised as noble ladies. What happens when she sends real assassins? The truth hung between them like a barrier. I could assign you guards," Lucius said quietly, "move you to secure quarters, and create an even bigger scandal. Divine Caesar, please. For both our sakes, you need to let me disappear. Finish your ball. Choose a princess. Forget the servant who sang your mother's song." "I can't forget you." The admission came out raw. "I've tried. But then I heard you were attacked. And all those rational arguments meant nothing compared to the rage I felt, the absolute certainty that letting anything happen to you would be unforgivable. Celine's breath caught. You can't say these things. Why not? It's already painful. Adding words just makes it honest. Honest feelings don't change political reality. No, they don't. Lucius stepped back, creating distance that felt like miles. You're right. About everything. I have duties that supersede personal desire. Rome needs an empress. The Senate needs assurance of succession. His voice hollowed out. I will choose a bride tomorrow night at the ball's conclusion. I will do my duty. And you? You should request a transfer to one of the provincial estates, somewhere far from Rome, where you'll be safe from political intrigue and from emperors who don't know when to let go of impossible dreams. Each word felt like a blade in Celine's chest, but she nodded. Yes, divine Caesar. That's wise. Oh, wisdom, Lucius said softly, is a cold comfort when your heart is breaking. He turned to leave, then paused without looking back. Thank you, Celine, for your honesty, for your song, for seeing me as human. I'll carry that gift for the rest of my life, even if I can never acknowledge it publicly. Then he was gone, leaving Celine alone with tears streaming down her face and the taste of blood on her split lip. She'd done the right thing, the rational thing. So why did doing the right thing feel like dying? Above her, preparations continued for the final night of the ball. Tomorrow, Emperor Lucius would choose his bride. Rome would celebrate, and Celine would request her transfer to a distant province, where she could spend the rest of her life trying to forget the impossible moment when an emperor had looked at her and seen someone worth protecting. But in the deepest chambers of her heart, she knew the forgetting would never be complete. Some moments changed you forever, regardless of whether they led anywhere. And that midnight conversation, those few stolen words, would echo through her entire life like a song that never truly ended. Even when the singer fell silent, even when the listener turned away, the melody remained, haunting and beautiful and utterly impossible. The third and final night of the ball arrived with the weight of destiny. Throughout Rome, citizens gathered in the forum and along the streets, waiting for the announcement that would shape the empire's future. Vendors sold wine and roasted nuts. Children perched on their fathers' shoulders. Even the poorest felt entitled to witness this moment, the selection of their future empress. Inside the palace, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Celine had requested her transfer that morning. The steward processed the paperwork with visible relief, assigning her to a rural estate in southern Italia, far enough from Rome to be forgotten, close enough to reach within a week. She would leave at dawn, immediately after the ball concluded. One more night of service, then exile to safety and obscurity. It was the right choice, the only choice. So why did her chest feel hollow? She dressed in her plainest tunic and took her position in the grand hall for the final time. The other servants avoided her, as if scandal might be contagious. Even Cassia kept her distance, offering only a sympathetic glance. The princesses arrived in unprecedented splendor. Princess Livia wore sapphires worth more than a farmer earned in a lifetime. Princess Claudia had acquired cloth of gold shot through with silver thread. Princess Marcella wore purple, technically reserved for imperial use, making a bold statement, and Princess Drusilla had transformed herself into something otherworldly. White silk embroidered with golden suns, copper hair arranged with actual golden wire forming a crown-like structure, eyelids painted with gold dust, lips crimson. She looked like Venus herself descending to claim worship. When she entered, her cold green eyes found Celine immediately. The smile was predatory, triumphant. I've won. You're leaving. Celine looked away. Wine amphora in hand, she moved through the crowd like a ghost. The trumpets sounded. Emperor Lucius entered in full imperial regalia, purple toga with gold embroidery, laurel crown, rings of office. He looked magnificent, powerful, every inch the divine ruler. But Celine saw the tension in his shoulders, the careful control, the way his eyes swept the princesses with the enthusiasm of a man surveying his own funeral. For just a moment, his gaze found hers across the hall. The connection lasted only a heartbeat, but Celine saw everything. Resignation, regret, a question that could never be answered. Then he looked away, and the moment shattered. Citizens of Rome! The senior consul's voice rang out. Tonight, Emperor Lucius Aurelius will announce his choice of bride. Tonight, we celebrate a new imperial dynasty. Cheers erupted. Musicians struck up triumphant melodies. Lucius ascended to his throne. The princesses arranged themselves before him in a semicircle, each positioned for maximum visibility. Before I announce my decision, Lucius said, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent hall, I want to thank each of these extraordinary women. Each represents the finest qualities of her province. Any man would be blessed to call any of them wife. The princesses preened. Princess Drusilla's smile grew confident. However, Lucius continued, marriage is not merely a political arrangement. Marriage should be a union of souls, a partnership built on honesty, respect, and understanding that transcends station. A murmur rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the expected speech. These past 3 days, I have been offered dowries that could fund legions, alliances that could reshape borders, political advantages that would make any ruler salivate with ambition. He paused, and the imperial mask cracked to reveal the man beneath. But I have also learned what I want from this life beyond duty, and I will not choose a wife based solely on political calculation. The murmur grew louder. Princess Drusilla's smile faltered. The consul looked alarmed. Your Majesty, the consul interjected, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. Lucius stood, descending from his throne. Rome deserves honesty from its emperor. He moved through the assembled princesses, acknowledging each with a nod, but passing them all. The crowd grew confused. Lucius walked toward the far wall where servants stood. He walked directly toward Selene. No, Selene whispered. Please don't. But Lucius stopped before her, and suddenly every eye focused on the servant girl in plain tunic. 3 nights ago, Lucius said, voice carrying throughout the hall, I heard someone singing my mother's song. I followed that voice and found this woman, Selene, a servant who has worked here for 6 years without recognition. Gasps filled the hall. Princess Drusilla's face went white, then red. We spoke that night. For the first time in 10 years of ruling, someone looked at me and saw a man instead of a crown. Someone told me uncomfortable truths. Someone reminded me that duty matters more than desire, even though saying so broke her heart. Your Majesty, the consul said, alarmed, what you're suggesting is impossible, I know. Lucius addressed the crowd. A servant cannot be empress. The Senate would revolt. Every tradition would scream against it. Relief flooded Selene. He understood. But here's what I've realized, Lucius said, voice strengthening. If I choose safety over truth, calculation over honesty, then I'm not choosing at all. I'm just performing a role, playing emperor while forgetting to be human. He turned back to Selene. I cannot make you empress, but I can choose not to marry anyone else. I can remain unmarried rather than enter a union built on lies. And I can offer you freedom, real freedom, citizenship, wealth, independence, the choice to stay or leave without obligation. You're insane, Selene whispered. The Senate, this will destroy you, perhaps, but pretending would destroy me more surely. He extended his hand. Just this once I want to choose differently, even if it costs me everything. The hall erupted. Senators shouted. Princess Drusilla screamed. The consul rushed forward, and Selene stared at the emperor's outstretched hand. Every rational part screamed to refuse. This was madness, political suicide, but he'd chosen desire over duty, accepting consequences. Her hand rose, trembling, reaching toward his. Their fingers touched. The hall exploded into bedlam. Princess Drusilla lunged forward. You dare choose a slave over a princess? Guards moved to intercept, but Drusilla was faster. Her hand emerged from her gown holding a dagger, small, concealed, deadly. She threw it with shocking accuracy. At Selene. Time slowed. Selene saw the blade spinning, saw hatred on Drusilla's face, saw death approaching. She couldn't move, but Lucius did. He stepped in front, pulling her behind him while reaching up. His hand caught the dagger mid-flight, the blade slicing deep into his palm. Blood bloomed red against white toga. Arrest her, Lucius commanded coldly. Attempted murder of the emperor. The penalty is death. Guards dragged Drusilla away, screaming. She's nothing. A servant. How dare you? Her voice faded. Princesses scattered. The consul looked ready to collapse. Selene cradled the emperor's wounded hand. You're hurt, she said. I've had worse. Lucius smiled despite pain, though these injuries are less embarrassing to explain. This isn't funny. I told you. I'm not letting anyone hurt you. He cupped her face with his uninjured hand. I can't make you empress, but I can protect you, give you freedom, and choose to live honestly, even if Rome burns. Rome won't burn, the consul said, approaching, but it will be complicated. He surveyed the chaos, frightened princesses, scandalized nobles, the emperor holding a servant with clear affection. This is unprecedented, insane, catastrophic. He sighed. And you are still emperor. Your word is law. If you choose not to marry, no one can force you. Though I strongly suggest avoiding any formal title for the young woman. Agreed, Lucius said. I don't want titles, Celine added. The consul shook his head. You're both foolish, but perhaps Rome needs foolishness. He addressed the crowd. The ball is concluded. The emperor has chosen to remain unmarried for now. This gathering is dismissed. As the hall emptied, Lucius and Celine stood in the chaos, holding each other. What happens now? Celine asked. Now, I get this bandaged. Lucius smiled. After that, we figure it out together, if you're willing. This is insane. Completely. The Senate might kill you. They've wanted to for years. He squeezed her hand gently. But for the first time in 10 years, I feel like I'm choosing something for myself. That's worth whatever comes. Celine looked into his eyes and made her impossible choice. Then let's be foolish together. Outside, dawn was breaking over Rome, and in the marble halls where 100 princesses had once competed for a crown, a servant girl and an emperor stood together, choosing truth over tradition. Whatever came next, they would face it honestly. Together, dawn broke over Rome with golden light that seemed almost too bright, as if the gods themselves were commenting on the madness of the previous night. The city woke to whispers that spread like wildfire. The emperor had rejected 100 princesses. A servant girl had been attacked. Princess Drusilla faced execution, and the palace trembled with uncertainty. Inside the Palladium Maximus, Celine sat in a chamber she'd never entered before. A private room reserved for imperial guests, furnished with silk cushions and marble tables. She felt like an imposter, a kitchen mouse suddenly transported to Olympus. A physician had tended to Lucius's wounded hand in the early morning hours, stitching the gash and wrapping it in clean linen. The blade had cut deep but missed tendons. Painful, but not permanently damaging. Afterward, he'd insisted she be given proper accommodations and promised to return once he'd dealt with the Senate's fury. That had been hours ago. The door opened. Cassia entered carrying a tray of food, her expression caught between awe and disbelief. The entire palace is talking about you, Cassia said. Half think you're a sorceress who bewitched the emperor. The other half think you're the bravest or most foolish person in Rome. Neither, Celine said quietly. I'm just someone who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The steward wants to kill you. The other servants are terrified, jealous, or quietly celebrating that one of us actually mattered. Cassia poured wine. They're calling you the emperor's servant in the streets. Celine sank onto a cushioned bench. I didn't want any of this. I just wanted to be invisible. Well, you're about as invisible as the Colosseum now. Cassia sat beside her. What did he offer you? Last night. What did he say? He offered me freedom, citizenship, wealth, independence. The choice to stay in his life or leave without obligation. Celine's voice dropped. He said he couldn't make me empress, but he could choose not to marry anyone else. Cassia exhaled slowly. He really chose you over an empire's worth of alliances. He chose honesty over politics. No, you're the woman the emperor took a blade for, the woman he's currently fighting the Senate over. Cassia gripped her hand. Own it. Whatever happens, own the choice you made. You reached for his hand, too. The door burst open. The senior consul entered, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Behind him came Lucius, his wounded hand bound in silk, expression grim. Leave us, the consul ordered Cassia, who bowed and departed. Lucius closed the door, then turned to face Celine. She started to kneel, but he stopped her with a gesture. No more kneeling. Not from you. He moved to the window. The Senate has been in session since dawn. They're not pleased. That's an understatement, the consul muttered. They're calling for your abdication, Caesar, claiming you're unfit to rule if you'll reject advantageous marriages for a servant. Celine's heart sank. Then I should leave. If I'm gone, the scandal fades. The scandal doesn't fade, Lucius interrupted. It's already spread throughout the empire. Running won't change that. The consul rubbed his temples. Here's the reality. The Senate cannot force you to marry or abdicate. You have the guards' loyalty and the common people adore this story. But they can make governing impossible if you continue to defy tradition. What are you suggesting? A compromise. Grant the girl citizenship and wealth as promised. Allow her to live in the palace under protection. But make it clear, publicly, officially, that she is not and will never be empress. That Rome will have a proper imperial marriage when the time is right. A mistress, Celine said quietly. You want me to be his mistress. Accept the gifts, but stay in the shadows. The consul looked uncomfortable. In less crude terms, yes. It allows the emperor to honor his word while appeasing the Senate's demands for propriety. Lucius's expression darkened. I won't ask her to accept a half-life, to hide while I parade a political bride for show. Then what will you do? The consul challenged. You've rejected 100 princesses. You've humiliated every noble family. You've created a scandal that threatens stability. Where does this end, Caesar? The question hung like a suspended sword. Celine watched Lucius struggle, saw the weight of empire crushing the moment of freedom he'd tried to claim. It ends here, Celine said, her voice stronger than she felt, with honesty instead of compromise. Both men stared at her. The consul is right. I can never be empress. The Senate would revolt, the provinces would see weakness, and everything you've built would crumble. But he's also wrong. I won't be a mistress hidden in shadows, accepting scraps while you maintain appearances with a loveless marriage. Then what do you want? Lucius asked. Celine stood before him. I want to be your friend, your advisor, someone you trust to speak truth when everyone else offers lies. Give me citizenship as promised. Give me education, purpose, meaningful work, but don't tie my value to being your lover or your secret shame. She turned to the consul, Tell the Senate the emperor granted citizenship to a loyal servant as reward for faithful service. Tell them I'll serve in the imperial household administratively. Tell them whatever makes this politically palatable. But the truth between us, she looked at Lucius, is that I'm staying because you need someone who sees you as human, and I need someone who sees me as more than a servant or scandal. The consul blinked. That might actually work, an imperial reward for service. It's unusual but not unprecedented. And what about this? Lucius gestured between them. What we feel, we figure it out as we go, Celine said, without expectations, without demands. Maybe it becomes something more. Maybe it remains friendship. But either way, it's honest. Lucius stared at her, then laughed, a sound of wonder and relief. You're extraordinary. I offer you wealth and protection, and you negotiate for friendship and purpose instead. Wealth without purpose is just a prettier cage. The philosophers would love you. He turned to the consul. Draft the proclamation. Celine receives citizenship and a position managing palace affairs. Make it boring enough that the Senate loses interest. The consul nodded. And Princess Drusilla? Lucius's expression hardened. Attempted murder carries a death sentence, but I'll be merciful. Exile instead of execution. She leaves Rome by week's end and never returns. The other princesses? Send them home with apologies and generous compensation. Make it clear the rejection wasn't personal. The consul departed to begin the political maneuvering required to salvage this disaster. When the door closed, Lucius and Celine stood alone in golden morning light. I ruined your ball, Celine said softly. You saved my life, at the ball and before it. He stepped closer, his uninjured hand finding hers. I don't know what this becomes, but for the first time since I became emperor, I'm choosing something real instead of political. Even if Rome disapproves, especially then. He smiled. Let them whisper and plot and write scandalized poetry. I'll still wake knowing I chose honesty. Outside, Rome continued its endless rhythm. Merchants opening shops, senators plotting, citizens gossiping. And inside the Palladium Maximus, where 100 princesses had competed for a crown, a servant girl and an emperor built something different. Not a fairy tale where the poor girl becomes empress, but something rarer and more valuable. A partnership built on truth. Whatever came next, political storms, social disapproval, the complex navigation of being neither servant nor empress but something undefined, they would face it together. The marble halls that once echoed with vanity now trembled with something new. Not the song of a servant who became empress, but the song of two people who chose each other when the world said they shouldn't. And Rome, for all its power and tradition, would learn to accommodate that choice, or learn that some forces, like honesty, courage, and genuine connection, could not be conquered by even the mightiest empire. The sun climbed higher over the 7 hills, and Celine, no longer a servant, not quite a noble, but something entirely her own, stood beside an emperor and looked toward a future they would write together. not with crowns or thrones, but with truth. And in Rome's long history of conquest and glory, that truth would prove more enduring than any empire. The story ended not with a wedding or a coronation, but with two people choosing to see each other clearly, and that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all.